Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Hi, this is Mark Graban. Welcome to episode 191 of the podcast for January 14th, 2014. My guest today is Mike Orzen. We're going to be talking about Lean IT. Mike is, of course, co-author of the Shingo Award-winning book, Lean IT, Enabling and Sustaining Your Lean Transformation. He is also, like me, a faculty member at the Lean Enterprise Institute. And like me, well, we have a lot in common. He is also collaborating with the good folks at the Theta Care Center for Healthcare Value. He's doing a new workshop called Leveraging Information, People, and Systems in Healthcare. And it's going to be held in Phoenix, January 28th and 29th. If you want to learn more and find links to that website, Mike's book, Mike's website, some other stuff, go to leanblog.org/191. And you can find all the past podcasts at leanpodcast.org, or an even shorter URL if you want to go to just leancast.org. You'll find all past episodes. If you like what you hear, I hope you subscribe. You can go to the iTunes store and you can search for Lean Blog. You can go to leancast.org and you'll find quick links to sign up through iTunes and lots of different methods. So as always, thanks for listening. Well, Mike, hey, it's great to talk to you again, and thanks for being a guest on the podcast today.
Thank you, Mark.
So let's start off. You're a co-author of a widely well-regarded book called Lean IT. What's your definition, just to jump right into that topic about Lean IT? How do you define that?
Well, I'd say that Lean IT is taking the core principles of Lean and operational excellence and applying them to information and how we deliver that information. That's basically Lean IT.
And so what are some of the differences? When you talk about, so if you're talking about delivering information, there's probably flow and maybe there's a value stream, and maybe you can touch on this, but what are some of the key ways? I mean, it's a different setting, of course, than manufacturing or healthcare. What are some of the key differences?
Well, some of the differences that can also be challenges when organizations are just starting off is the fact that you're working in an area, when you think of information, you're dealing with knowledge, you're dealing with intangibles. So many of the paradigms and models of Lean, such as flow or such as standardized work, don't necessarily translate, at least intuitively, in the IT world. A lot of brilliant people go into IT, but they really live in a different universe. So many of the examples and the models that we see in Lean just don't seem to get much traction with the IT group.
What in particular, what are some of those ideas that don't translate well or translate easily? Can you give an example of that?
Well, sure. You can, if you talk about waste in a process and you look at the 7 or 8 wastes of Lean that are classically defined, a lot of people say inventory would be a good example. You might talk about inventory, and IT professional kind of looks at that and says, so what is really inventory in my space? Is it lines of code? Is it tickets that I need to do? And is inventory necessarily a bad thing? If I'm writing code to enable a piece of software, how is having more inventory worse than having less inventory? So sometimes the concepts don't really translate clearly or as purely. Mm-hmm. Really, what I like to do is take those pieces of Lean that I think are most applicable and most valuable to IT and to information and use those. And really what it comes down to, in my opinion, Lean is more about methodical problem solving than anything else. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're doing. We're sharing, teaching, and coaching people to solve problems more effectively. And you would think that people in IT would be great problem solvers, and they are in a certain space. And that space is in a technical component space, in a network space, in their particular silo of expertise. They've spent their whole career solving technical challenges. However, when we move to lean thinking, of course, we're talking about systemic thinking. And I think there's a little bit of a paradox here, because I used to believe that, well, the IT people have got to be systems thinkers. They're working on systems all day. But it turns out that for a lot of IT professionals, systemic thinking is actually a new concept, because they've had their heads deep down in the detail of their particular IT expertise.
Right.
So when you say it's time to look up and think of the interrelationship of work systems with technology systems and how they interact and the complexity of that, for a lot of people, that kind of blows their mind. That's a new way of looking at things. And it's also not very comfortable, because it pushes them out of their comfort zone and their area of specialization.
Well, I mean, everything you described there, I think, could have been a discussion about specialists and clinicians in a healthcare setting if you just kind of copied and pasted a few words. Because you think, well, obviously there's lots of very smart people working in healthcare,
Yes.
experts in increasingly narrow niches, and they're great scientists or problem solvers when it might come down to a patient's sickness. But translating that to solving organizational problems, I think, like you said, it takes them out of their comfort zone sometimes, right?
Yes, yeah, very much so. And it's interesting, Mark, that you point that out. When I'm talking to different organizations about lean IT, I'd say the most common response is, well, wait a second, these concepts apply to our product development group as well. These concepts apply to any professional group that has a specialization, an area of focus. The only thing that really makes it lean IT is using examples of the application of kaizen in an IT space. Mm-hmm. So we're actually making a cycle of improvement to the service desk, to the network deployment team, to the cybersecurity group and their processes. Yeah. But besides that, if you look at it, you could say, no, wait a second, this is basically the same approach that we would use in a hospital or in a factory or in a bank.
When you talk about the boundaries of lean IT, I mean, there's a lot of focus on software development methods, whether it's Agile, or Scrum or other practices related to writing new code. But lean IT has got a broader definition than that, including the IT operations of a hospital system or of a large manufacturing company. Yeah. Can you talk about those boundaries a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, very much so. So there's nothing wrong with Agile. I think Agile has served a great purpose.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't saying there's anything wrong with it either.
No. Well, I guess I'm prefacing my comment because I don't mean to come across as negative regarding Agile, but the benefits that Agile brought to the table, and that was to introduce a structured methodology where, more importantly than anything else perhaps, IT got to a place at the table with the business on a regular cadence, be that every 4 weeks or every 2 weeks, whatever the sprint was. They'd sit down with the product owner, they'd use their storyboards, and it certainly created much more of a link and a communication between IT and the business. And I think that's been very good. Mm-hmm. The downside of Agile, if we don't step far enough away, is that it can actually detract from what I would describe as the boundaries of lean IT. So lean IT is, think of the life cycle of information. So the life cycle of information is from concept to solution. It's from first contact with the customer, be it an inquiry or an order or any kind of contact, to the entire life cycle of fulfilling the customer's needs, maybe follow up with the patient, who knows what it could be. Yeah. So that life cycle is much, much broader than the narrow focus of Agile. Agile is all about the efficient, well-aligned creation of code to deliver functionality, and that's all good. Right. But as you point out, it's much broader than that. So really, if you think of IT in somewhat of a simplistic way, if you look at it in two pieces, you've got the build side of the IT equation, and you've got the run side. So the build side is obviously writing code, but building the infrastructure out. The run side is making things go on a daily basis and maintaining break fix, enhancements, patches, revs, that kind of thing. Right. And often when organizations focus exclusively on Agile, they actually end up neglecting the run side of the business. And there's a whole, it's not really a new movement, but there's a movement trying to coordinate those two pieces so they become seamless, and that's called DevOps. So the DevOps group, really what they're trying to do is say there should not be, and there in actuality is no separation between the people that are building the functionality and the people that are maintaining and are delivering it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that reminds me of, back in the manufacturing space of integrated product and process design, that product development can't just create what they think is an amazing product and chuck it over the wall to the factory to say, well, we don't care if you can actually build this or not. But exactly. Integrating that handoff and having it be more collaborative, what you described really reminds me of that.
And, the best example that I heard of that was to ask the developers who are, quote, tossing the code over the wall, have them wear the pager for the first month after go live. Have them get the call at 2 a.m. in the morning. So, because obviously if I'm a developer, I'm most interested in starting my next project, not hanging around and seeing how my current release is doing. Yeah. That's, we'll let the run people deal with that.
Well, there was another interface that Rich Sheridan talked about. So he was my guest in podcast 189 for Menlo Innovations in Ann Arbor.
Oh, yeah, I've met Rich. Great guy.
Yeah, and so in his book Joy Inc., he talked about reducing, I guess, the inventory, reducing the time. So maybe here's an example of inventory. Code that's been written that's sitting and waiting for QA.
Yes.
That by having those cycles and by better integrating QA people and breaking down some of those silos, that they get faster testing and better product. And he said that they don't have the pagers going off all the time once they've gotten product released.
Yeah, and that's a great example. What when I'm talking about Lean IT in my workshops, I like to talk about partially done work. So anytime, whether it's code or the investigation of a problem or standing up a piece of equipment, anytime we stop doing work, we obviously stop the flow of value. We put it down, we thrash, and we go to another topic. And then we pick it up and we say, where was I? So this introduced incredible amounts of rework. Yeah. And I believe that is the biggest challenge in most IT groups. It's a little bit like they're on a beach getting smashed by a wave. Mm-hmm. And when the water starts to clear, they stick their head up like, oh, good, I'm okay now. I can get my bearings. And just as they're getting their bearings, they get smashed with another wave. Yeah. And that wave in IT is what we call break fix. So what broke today? And the challenge is, how do I prioritize the things I should be doing to the things that I must be doing when our ERP system has gone down. So our Epic system is not running in the hospital, or patient check-in is not functioning properly. You can't really say to the business, well, we'll look at that tomorrow. We're kind of busy today working on the things we should be working on. We're improving our process. It's very difficult. So it's I think the urgency of IT and the visibility of IT, it makes it particularly challenging. Mm-hmm. But this is where Lean actually helps and comes to the rescue, because obviously in all Lean thinkers, we realize that if we're not improving the core process, then what's happening? Well, we're going to have more unplanned work, more break fix, and it's not going to magically heal itself or get better. And in many organizations, if you look, they're spending less than 5% of their time on process improvement. They're not, so they are so far away from daily kaizen, it's not even funny. And if you don't put your foot down and say, look, we've got to turn the corner here, it's only going to get worse. The pace of change in technology and the rate of demand from the user community in terms of functionality are both accelerating, completely out of control. And IT groups that just kind of ignore this and say, well, it is what it is, we're just going to keep working as hard as we can, and maybe we'll put in some overtime and work the weekends, that's not going to get it done. And unfortunately, I see it a lot, and people just get burned out, and they pay a major price, not just professionally, but also physically. It's not good for them.
Yeah. Well, and that 5% number in a lot of healthcare organizations, that would be a high percentage of time spent on kaizen and continuous improvement. And I would say amen to what you were saying about, sometimes you just need to, and some of the organizations I'm working with are doing this. They'll put their foot down and say, okay, this, like you said, it's going to get worse unless we intentionally create some time. And it's not easy, but we can figure out how. We'll make time.
Yes.
We'll start making things better. So I'm curious, I wanted to touch on this. I'm glad you came back to talking about kaizen. I'm sure people in IT might want to focus on the new stuff, the innovation. What are some examples of kaizen and continuous improvement, like small kaizen in an IT environment that you can think of?
Well, there's a few that I like to do. One of my favorites to introduce the IT group to kaizen is to look at the onboarding process. So when we bring in a new employee, be it a contractor or a full-time employee, obviously IT has a lot of prep to do. And I think most people have gone through the experience of showing up for their first day of work, and there's no laptop available, or the laptop's here, but the software isn't installed, or the software's installed, but you have no permissions, or you have permissions, but they haven't set up the appropriate profiles for you to get your work done. And I would hazard to guess that millions and millions of dollars are wasted every year because new employees sit on the bench for what can be up to a month. Mm-hmm. And this happened to me years ago, and I remember they showed me to my cube, and they threw me an employee manual. And there I was, looking at this dry manual for a couple of weeks and taking a lot of coffee breaks and just looking for some people who wanted to shoot the breeze. Mm-hmm. So I certainly wasn't adding any value, but I was on the payroll. And when I tell that story, a lot of people say, oh, I've got a better one than that.
Yeah. Well, it seems like a really common thing. Rich Sheridan, again, back to him in his book, he talks about how that's so common, and they've really worked hard to not have people get demoralized and bored and second guessing themselves, when they've taken this new job and they're excited about it and the organization's not ready for them. Like there's some poor flow, I guess, if you're looking at that hiring and onboarding process as a value stream.
And what's great about that one is IT, when you're doing it effectively, you pull in the other key players in the value stream. So typically facilities is represented in the team, HR is represented in the team, and one or two hiring managers that have a lot of the volume of hiring, they're represented on the team as well. So you introduce people to the power of a cross-functional team. They learn A3 thinking and value stream mapping. It's a great one, and everybody benefits from the improvements. And it's tangible. It's easy to see. It's not that tough. But for IT groups that kind of get and you can start there. But when they say that's nice, but we've got some things that are more in our own backyard that we need to deal with. Often IT groups struggle with resource planning. So they've got project work, they've got break-fix work, they've got emergencies, and the challenge of having the right person available to do the job when the job needs to be done is enormous. And when the team comes in and we look at current state, what we typically find is there is no standard way to get work into the pipeline in IT. We've got everything from a ticketing system that looks very official and formal, to Post-it notes, to patting somebody on the back in the hallway and saying, "Can you do me a favor?" to the vice president picking up the phone and saying, "Drop everything and get this done." So without kind of a structured way to make your promises as an IT group and to assign resources appropriately, you're just setting yourself up to disappoint a lot of people and to frustrate your people. So that's a great one.
So we're going to talk about your workshop and leveraging information people and systems in healthcare. But maybe as a way of transitioning into that, kind of stepping back a little bit about, because we've got a lot of people in the audience from healthcare, how is Lean applied to IT impacting healthcare in positive ways? What are some of the things that you see organizations working on that are really noteworthy or interesting?
Well, the interesting thing about technology, and I think all your listeners experience this every day, when technology works, it is a wonderful thing. And when it doesn't work, it's perhaps the most frustrating thing in our society. It's the most frustrating experience that we have in today's world. And we've become very accustomed to technology that works. So our cell phone works 99.9% of the time. We don't have issues. So when we come into work and we need information to do our job, and we need the information to be accurate and easily accessible and easy to understand, and it doesn't, it has a huge impact on our job. Mm-hmm. So in healthcare, of course, we want visibility of the patient, where they are in the process, in the care process, in their life cycle as a patient/customer. And the introduction of electronic medical records, I think, has been a blessing and a curse for those organizations that have implemented it around the work processes that it supports. They can report some real success with EMR. Mm-hmm. Others that have really led with the technology, not with the underlying work process, have had budget overruns, lots of frustration, and the technology, they feel like they're a slave to the technology mm-hmm. instead of the technology being a servant right. to the work that they have to do. And I see it, it's interesting, Mark, because the healthcare community is experiencing this and has been for, I would say, the past 10 years, particularly, maybe past 5 years, particularly with the changes in law. But this lesson has been a lesson that has not been learned in the manufacturing world for about 40 years. Mm-hmm. And the lesson is leading with technology is always a mistake, always a mistake. Yeah. we lead with understanding our business process, improving that process, and then configuring the technology to support the business process. Right. And many businesses don't want to hear that. Many hospitals don't want to hear that. They say, we don't have the time to understand, let alone improve our business processes. We will buy a package that comes equipped with what they call best practices. And those best practices are a myth, because you might say, no, they're not a myth. I mean, there is the right way to write a prescription or to process a lab order. However, there may be a right way or a generic way to do it, but I can almost guarantee you it's not exactly in alignment with what your people are doing today.
Well, that was the exact same pipe dream of ERP in the mid-90s in manufacturing.
Exactly. It's the same thing. You know, they say life keeps teaching you the same lesson until you learn it. And I believe we still haven't learned it. And now there's, I think, a few organizations that have learned it and realized that, you know, in my book, I like to use the mantra, people, process, technology, in that order. Yeah. So first, we obviously engage and enable our people to understand and improve processes, and basically to see the flow of value, to know when it's broken, and to have the capability to fix it when the flow is broken. That's what we want in a great organization. And once the people have that, they're in a position to successfully understand and improve their work processes. Then and only then should we be asking ourselves, what do we need to do with the technology? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, most organizations say, we don't have that kind of time, we don't have that kind of patience. So back the bus up. Let's bring in a $500 million monolithic piece of software, smack it in here, and then we can. I was at one company, and the CEO said, "The sooner we go live, the sooner we can begin the healing process." And I love the term, and I respect this person very much. However, the healing process was a long, painful recovery, because it was like they did a forced open heart transplant without preparing the patient or checking for compatibility. So there was just the amount of resistance and misalignment between the technology and the configuration and the way people actually did their daily jobs was so high that the operation was kind of rejected by the host, and that can be very painful and very expensive.
Right. So imagine that's one of the topics that'll be in your workshop, and it's coming up in a couple of weeks in Phoenix on January 28th and 29th. People can go to createvalue.org and find it. I'll also post a link to the workshop in the blog post for this episode. But Mike, tell us a little bit about who the workshop is, who the attendees should be, and what are some of the key things you'll be discussing, and the main points that people might learn and get to discuss, like we're doing here.
Well, the workshop is really targeted for two key groups. And first of all, lean champions within the healthcare organization are going to benefit, because they need to understand how to effectively relate these concepts with the IT group and to work productively with the IT team. But it's also for the IT professionals. So the best profiles that I've seen a few hospitals send their CIO and 3 or 4 of their IT directors. So the leadership group is from the IT team is particularly valuable to send, because the first day is a combination of lecture and hands-on exercises. When you're doing those exercises with your coworkers, you're doing them specifically about issues. You're applying the concepts to issues that are waiting for you when you return. So it's particularly valuable for that group. The second day, we actually start the day by going to the Gemba. And in this case, we're going to be at John C. Lincoln in Phoenix. And they've been kind enough to open up their hallways, so to speak, so we can go to the Gemba, see what they're doing in Lean IT, learn from that, and then do our own check adjust, meaning, so what we learned on day one, what did we see at the Gemba on day two, what's working, what would we change, and how might we adapt that to our environment when we return back to work.
Mm-hmm. So what do you recommend in terms of ways for people to get in touch with you? I feel like we've just scratched the surface on the things that you're so knowledgeable about and have experience with. Can you talk about websites, Twitter, ways people can find you online if they'd like to delve deeper than we were able to here?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I can be reached at www.maorzen.com. That's MAORZEN.com. And I'm on Twitter at Mike Orzen, and I'm on LinkedIn under Mike Orzen as well. So it's pretty easy to find me. On Twitter, I tweet pretty much every day, always on a topic that has to do with lean, IT, or some related topic in that particular area.
Well, good. And I'll have links to all those different ways people can reach you on the page for this episode. But again, Mike, it's great talking to you. I'm glad we could find it. I mean, we've talked a lot, but I'm glad we could actually record it and make a podcast out of it. And certainly wish you great luck with the workshop and your collaborations with the good folks at the Theta Care Center for Healthcare Value. And hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Great. Hey, thanks, Mark. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For Lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.